I guess this leads us to the idea of separation, the taking too seriously the feeling of being this relatively separate location in reality, and the suffering that can come with that. And we mentioned at the start, the reason to do this might be to find happiness as the kind of, I guess I'm pointing out that could be understood to be the counterpart to the suffering that comes with separation. There is these positive felt states that go along with this sense of union with everything.
Yes. There's nothing wrong with acting as if the body were separate from other physical objects. For this reason, we don't just walk out across a busy road. We wait for the cars, for the break in the cars, because although ultimately there is no distinction between us, that obvious consequences. So there's nothing wrong with provisionally relating to a separate physical body. The problem is that when we believe and feel that we are a separate individual limited self, a self located in the body, if we trace back any afflictive emotion, jealousy, shame, anxiety, they can all be traced back to the belief and feeling that we are a temporary finite self. In other words, afflictive emotions arise on behalf of an ultimately illusory, temporary, finite, separate self. The emotions such as peace or joy, I don't really refer to them as emotions in order to try to make a clear distinction. I don't consider peace and joy and happiness to be emotions that fluctuate with sorrow and anxiety and jealousy. That they are the nature of awareness. When the afflictive emotions are absent, the nature of awareness shines. So happiness in this context is not an emotion that alternates with another emotion, namely unhappiness. It is the background of all emotions. It is veiled by the experience of sorrow or jealousy or anxiety. But just because it is veiled does not mean it is absent. So unhappiness in this context would be the veiling of happiness, not the absence of happiness. The joy, love, peace, happiness, these are the nature of awareness, and because the nature of awareness is always present, they are always present in everybody all the time, but in many cases veiled for much of the time.
I completely agree that is our kind of true nature, and I think it's something that from the perspective of the separate self, it sounds kind of too good to be true, or the separate self that is in suffering and in unhappiness. If you make it as a positive claim and you say there is this thing called peace or love or joy to be found, that doesn't, I think for a lot of people that doesn't sound right. But so I think it's really the nuanced way that you put it is excellent, because I think we're using these words to point to something experiential, point to what it feels like
very much so.
Unified.
Yes, and this, speaking of language, that this is, as you well know, is right in Buddhism. They tend not to speak very much about happiness. They tend to refer to the absence of suffering. And there's a lot of intelligence in that, because it doesn't reify happiness as an objective state or an objective emotion that one may achieve in the future. So I just use the term happiness simply because it is the common name for that which everybody loves and seeks above all else. But I fully acknowledge that one has to explain, as I have done, that what the term means to, so as not to mistake it for just yet another emotion that alternates with all one's other emotions. Yes.
Right, and compassion is also a word that's used a lot in Buddhism for the kind of true nature of the mind, this all-inclusive, embracing, loving quality, which, I think is also something that people um, unless you've experienced this, it may sound too good to be true, that if you let go into, or you discover what our true nature is, it does just shine forth with this embracing, loving, compassionate quality.
Yes, because if one discovers one's true nature, one discovers that one's own being is shared with everyone and everything. There is no such thing as an individual or finite being. There is just being, and being is like physical space. It can't be divided up. You can build a wall around it, but you don't divide the space. The space inside the room is still the same infinite space of the universe that it was before the building was erected. Well, the being in each of us is not really in each of us. It is the single universal being from which everyone and everything derives its apparently independent existence. And that recognition is the experience of love. That's what love is. Love is not an emotion or a feeling. It is the recognition of our shared being. That then expresses itself in our behavior as compassion. So I would suggest that love is the very nature of our being. That is, it is shared. Compassionate action is the inevitable consequence of that recognition, simply because one feels the other as oneself.
Right, and you don't need to be told to.
Because the other is one.
Exactly, and you don't need to be told to not harm oneself. It's just self-evident, right, that you.
No one has to be told not to harm. Exactly. This is why when Saint Augustine was asked about the moral or ethical implications of this understanding, he simply said, "Love and do whatever you want." By which he meant the one thing you have to understand and feel, that everyone and everything share their being. If that's the one thing you understand and feel, and you lead a life that is consistent with that understanding, you don't need any more guidance or teaching in your life. Just live a life that is consistent with that felt understanding.